Hello, I'm Dr. Maurie Markman from City of Hope, and I'd like to discuss a very interesting paper. Actually, one very different type of a topic for me because it's somewhat technical, and you'll appreciate the point in a moment. So the paper was entitled, it was actually more of a commentary, 2-to-1 randomization, rarely advisable, published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology, Oncology Practice. So this is looking at a strategy that is often, and I might suggest increasingly employed in oncology trials, which is to randomize patients 2-to-1. So 2 patients get the experimental drug or experimental strategy compared to 1 patient who would get therapy in the randomized trial on the control arm. The basic reason, as noted in this paper, for doing this was very simply to make the trial more attractive to patients to become research subjects, thereby increasing the rate of accrual and hopefully shortening the time for the conduct of the trial. Very simple, very straightforward goal. Oh, more patients will want to enter, we'll get the study done quicker. Sounds very simple on the surface, kind of attractive. And in fact, these investigators noted that looking at the Journal of Clinical Oncology in the years 2022 to 2023, of 81 reported randomized 2-arm superiority trials, fully 19%, basically 1 out of 5, used 2-to-1 randomization. So this is not rare at all. But as the title suggests, this is not necessarily a good idea. And in the interest of true transparency, I agree with them completely. Why not? Well, first, there is no clear evidence, as noted by the individuals who wrote this paper, that in fact such a design actually does increase accrual rates. You say, well, that's the goal, but does it work? So number one, we don't know if it works to increase accrual rate. But in addition, the design actually requires, and I don't know how everybody knows this, the need to increase the sample size. So again, the statistical laws that say, okay, you're going to do 2-to-1 randomization, you think you may get patients in more quicker, but by the way, you have to increase the number of patients you're entering into the trial, which in fact may eliminate any benefit that you think you're going to get from going to the 2-to-1 randomization. But more concerning than that, and this I believe is the major point, this decision and then subsequent explanation of it may increase the research subject's expectation of benefit, which of course is counter to what the fundamental statement is about the research aim of the trial, which is to see if there's added benefit. I'm not talking about what patients may expect or not expect. Very important to the patients to hope for benefit. But from a trial perspective, the goal is to say, we don't know if this is going to be benefit, but this may even increase that concern of patients expecting benefit. And this leads to a very critical concern that I believe as relates to a absolute core, one might say foundational principle of clinical research that certainly has been in the forefront of my 40 years of involvement in clinical studies. And that is the critical statement that the individual doctor, investigator has to look at the question of clinical equipoise when they are considering entry of a patient into any type of a clinical study, including and very prominently randomized trials, meaning do they believe that this particular study, this participation, is in the patient's best interest? They would not be harmed on the basis of anything the investigator knows by participating. And particularly in a randomized trial, that the investigator does not personally have a reason to believe, based upon their knowledge, experience, other data and literature, that being randomized to one arm or the other arm will be detrimental to that patient. They have no reason personally to believe that. And therefore, participation in the trial satisfies the criteria of equipoise from the perspective of that investigator. So again, 2-to-1 randomization makes it seem like, oh, it's better to get the experimental arm. Is that true? If it is, then it is appropriate to even consider the study. In addition, there is the concern that individuals in the control arm, because they're already thinking that the experimental arm is better, may be more likely to actually drop out with this heightened focus on the potential efficacy of the experimental arm. And they're, again, indirectly implying that the experimental arm is better. So if I get randomized to the control arm, I'm more likely to drop out. And finally, and something that is not often thought of, there is a theoretical concern that if at the end of the day, it turns out not only is the experimental arm not better, but it might be worse, including toxicity. So you've now doubled the number of patients who've experienced that potential harm compared to if you had done 1-to-1 randomization. So again, as the author suggests, 2-to-1 randomizations is in general not a good idea. This is an interesting paper to read. I would encourage those interested in clinical trials design and oncology to read this paper. And again, I thank you for your attention.